Okay, welcome everyone who is following us on the social media, on YouTube, or on Facebook, all the people who have worked on the Tolkien exhibition for the meeting of Rimini, on the Tree of Tales exhibition, which is here in the Fiera Rimini during the exhibition for the meeting of Rimini, exhibition, which is here in the Fiera Rimini with so we are taking a problem which we're trying to solve. Ok? No, non il mio computer, non è quello. So we have a technical... Okay, we have a technical problem. We're going to fix it very soon, I hope. Ok, let's try again. Luca, just one second. Luca, devi chiudere l'audio di uscita. Sorry, coming back. Luca, devi chiudere. Luca, adesso se devi chiudere l'audio. Okay, we try again. So switch back to the beginning. Can you hear me? Check if you can hear me with the headphones. Controlla se mi senti con le cuffie, Luca. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, we can start. Okay. 0 moment, we start again. So welcome everyone to the conference, the Tree of Tales at the meeting of Rimini. This conference is associated with an exhibition. We are calling you from Rimini. This is the 3rd day of the exhibition. We're going to be here until the 25th, but that's an exhibition which is also possible to visit online. So you can go on the website, thetreeoftales.it. You can access on the virtual museum. But one of the main features of this exhibition is that it's been prepared with a year of work, which involved many different people. Some of these people have been kindly agreed to work together with us on this path, are among the best, most important academics on Tolkien from all around the world. We have people attending the conference from more than 8 countries. And we are going to start what, if you want, is going to be a moment of reflection on the core and the heart of the exhibition. And if you read the presentation, the description of the conference, which is also strictly related to the approach of the exhibition, our main focus today and tomorrow is going to be the relationship between the primary and the secondary world. That's one of the most complex, if you want, issues for all people interested in Tolkien. On the one hand, we are all in love with the secondary world of Tolkien, but at the same time, we cannot resist from trying to understand the meaning within the secondary world, the relationship between the secondary world and the primary world. There are very many different ways to conceive this relationship. There are people, of course, you use an allegorical approach, which, as we know, Tolkien would have certainly rejected. And there are other people who try to, if you want, cut any possible link between the primary and the secondary world. What we're trying to do today and tomorrow is, if you want, to walk a different way, a third way, between the two main temptations that one can have. By either one is just to give focus to the primary world and forget the beauty, and if you want, the independence and the autonomy of the secondary world, or other people will actually just stay in the secondary world without thinking that there is nothing we can learn, there is nothing we can know buried in Tolkien. And if you want, this issue is at the core of many of the divisions within the Tolkien scholarly world, both in Italy but also outside Italy. There are people who are, if you want, obsessed with religion, and they use Tolkien as a way to, if you want, to evangelize or infer Christian values. On the other hand, there are people who reject any possible religious dimension to Tolkien, which is a bit weird for many different reasons. But again, we are trying to we're going to try to walk a different way, or at least we're going to reflect on this issue. How can we conceive the relationship between the primary and the secondary world? It's a path we're going to walk together over these 2 days. We are going to use the English. That's an international conference and it's an academic event. And so the English is the language. And I invite everyone who are following us on YouTube and Facebook to participate to the conference by sending their comments and questions. So we're going to have a Q&A at the end of each session. But I'll stop here and I will leave the floor straight away to one of the protagonists of this project, who is Father Guglielmo Spirito from Assisi. Does not need a lot of presentation, so I would just simply say that Father Guglielmo was one of the pioneers of Tolkien studies, especially here in Italy, when he was not so fashionable. He has been on Tolkien study for many years and has reflected a lot on Tolkien and is going to share some of his wisdom and today with us. Just to give you the structure, so each of us is going to speak either 15 or 20 minutes, followed by 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A. But in order to make things a bit easier, we are going to have the Q&A at the end of the 3 speakers. So we're going to have the 3 speakers give their talk one after the other, and at the end of it, we're going to have between 15 to 30 minutes of discussion. We have started today at 4 p.m. and we're going to end about 5:30. So I leave the floor to Father Guglielmo, and thank you very much to all of you for being here today. Thank you very much for all of you who are following us on the social network, but also to all of you that will listen to this talk later on. This is a live conference, of course, from the meeting of Rimini, but at the same time is, if you want, something that we're building up for the future. So we say hello and thank everybody. Thanks a lot, and I leave the chair to Father Guglielmo.
So I will try to introduce the Maiar in Middle-earth as co-workers and sub-creators, which is linked with the general intuition of the exhibition of this year here in the meeting of Rimini. As recounted in the Ainulindalë, the Ainur are the archetypical sub-creators called to adorn the great music of Ilúvatar, each with their own thoughts and devices. Their artistic task, however, was not restricted to that primordial event. The secondary world is not realized in a single moment as a static entity, but rather a dynamic one, with a complete history which will grow, develop, and flourish in time, indeed only thanks to the sub-creating activity of the Valar, the Ainur who enters into Arda. The Valar drew into them many companions whose being also began before the world, of the same order as themselves, but of a lesser degree, called the Maiar. They labored together as co-workers and sub-creators in the ordering of the earth. But when we read Ainulindalë or Valaquenta, sometimes we arrive to a sort of a wrong deduction or feeling that what it is told is about the past. And it's not so, because the tale is about a beginning which is still unfolding. The world is still unachieved, unfolding, developing, growing in non-prefigured ways until, it is said, after the end of days, when the themes of Ilúvatar shall be played fully aright by the Valar, Maiar, elves, and men without flaws. So until the end of days, this sub-created activity is still unachieved. And that perhaps the truest way to describe this activity is that of the gardener, which Tolkien himself uses, for instance, in letter 183. So let us see. If the world is an artistic work, the accomplishers of this sub-creative design are originally the holy powers, the Valar, as servants of Eru in the world, with their co-workers, the Maiar, who apparently take care of the details, being more, how to say, down to earth. In particular, some of them took an interest in and entered into the fabric of the events of Middle-earth and into the lives of the free peoples who inhabit it, involving themselves in the struggles, hardships, and dramas. So this sensibility of the Maiar, who want to be involved in the unfolding of things, is their particular way of fulfilling the subcreation of the world. And Maiar, they can interact with the free people of Middle-earth, whispering to their minds and hearts even in invisible ways. And especially, they will interact with the mundus imaginalis, that area in between the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual world, the mental world, helping people to become at their turn subcreative. Some of these Maiar enter in Middle-earth as the wizards sent by the Valar to try to help in the fights of Middle-earth and to advise and persuade men and elves to good. And that includes to put into their memories and in their imagination a clear vision in the mind of things not physically present at the body's situation, but not only to an idea, but to a full clothing of this in particular form and detail. And elves and men, they did not know whence came the fair visions or the promptings of wisdom that they receive into their hearts. One of these Maiar, which is perhaps the best known, is Gandalf, one of the Istari, the angelic order who was sent to achieve this task of helping the resistance against Sauron. But he was one of a group, and at his set in Unfinished Tales, it may be seen that they were each free to do what they could in this mission, that they were not commanded or supposed to act together as a small central body of power and wisdom, and that each had different powers and inclinations and were chosen by the Valar with this in mind. And it's very interesting. So as co-workers and sub-creators, the Maiar are very concrete and very different one another. As people is very concrete and very different from one another. We said that the best known is Gandalf, and Círdan in the Grey Havens divined in him the greatest spirits and the wisest, and entrusted to his keeping the ring of fire, to kindling all hearts to courage. There is a certain affinity between Gandalf of fire, and he defines himself in his confrontation with the Balrog in Moria as a servant of the secret fire. And as we know from the beginning of the tale, this secret fire is which gives to the Ainul and to the Valar the subcreative capacity. So Gandalf, being a servant of the secret fire, he takes from this source his capacity of being subcreative and helping others to become so. Opposing the fire that devours and wastes with a fire that kindles and succors in vain hope and distress. Because his joy is in the delight of fire who gladdens the heart. This touch of joy and delight is evident in the style of Gandalf, and even Sam, in the bliss of Lúthien, has the nostalgia of the fireworks of Gandalf, because are a reflection of this secret fire, very concrete, who gives delight. And the joy of Gandalf was in the renewal of hope, but he was unable to create things ex nihilo. Out of nothing, no Maiar, no Valar is able to do anything. He cannot burn snow in the Caravras. He needs something concrete to transform into flame. So what was Gandalf? In one of his letters, Tolkien said, there is no precise modern term to say what he was. He was an angelos, a messenger of the Lord of the West, to train, advise, instruct, arouse the hearts and minds of those threatened by Sauron to a resistance with their own strength, and not just to do the job for them, but in a humble disguise, convincing people, persuading people, not forcing people. In an emergency, he can act as an angel, no more violently than the release of St. Peter from prison, as in Acts 12. And his high elfin name, Olorin, it means something with olos is vision, fantasy. So it alludes already to his capacity of promoting visions of wisdom, fair visions, promptings of wisdom that he put into the hearts of those who hurt him. So he acts in the imagination of people, changing the mood of people, as it is seen in the siege of Minas Tirith. Wherever he came, men's hearts would lift again, and the winged shadows pass from memory. Or he will help Frodo, who thinks he's dead, in the summit of Hamon En. Then a flash from some other point of power came to his mind. Take it off, fool, take it off. Take off the ring. And Gandalf said to the Aragorn and the others, I fought with the Black Lord, helping Frodo from afar. And it's in many occasions he do that. So this Maiar sent in the fabric of Middle-earth to help people to modify even innate tendencies in their desired directions, in some cases to change them in a permanent way, says Tolkien in one of the letters. They are really sub-creators, helping the people to develop their own gifts and potentialities. As when he said to Frodo, I will always help you to bear this burden as long as yours to bear. So the function of this Maiar in the fabric of Middle-earth is to support and promote the sub-creativity, the capacity of reaction and imagination and fantasy, and the exercise of free will in people. It's a thing that was said by St. Cyril of Alexandria and from St. Gregory of Narek in the old patristic and medieval period, of the function of the guardian angel as the gardener who helps the tree give fruit. And it's what Gandalf himself said to Denethor. I shall not wholly fail on my task if anything passeth through this night, that I can still grow fair and bear fruit and flower in days to come. Even he shows to Aragorn the sapling of the tree, of the white tree. So he's a gardener, and he helps the tree to grow and to flower and to give fruit. That is wonderful. And we never think, I believe, that the Maiar has this function, involved with the people of Middle-earth. And it's wonderful because Tolkien was convinced that this happens also in the primary world, not only in the secondary world. Rekindling with divine fire all the capacities of humans to become fully themselves, to become themselves, to rise to the plenitude of those creative tasks which they are called to accomplish in their self-creativity. Freedom is the realizable but not yet realized possibility to become oneself. That is the task of a Maiar. The philosophical and theological background of this is excellently expressed by a Russian thinker of the contemporary of Tolkien, but that Tolkien knew not, Sergei Bulgakov, in his book Jacob's Ladder. And last week was published in Italian a study, Cielo e Terra, l'angelo come archetipo celeste nella teologia di Bulgakov, by a young priest from Perugia. All the philosophical and theological thought of these co-workers beside the human beings to help them flourish are analyzed here. I make the presentation of the book linking this with the thought of Tolkien. So it's fascinating to see the capacity that Tolkien had in his secondary world, in a narrative way, to tell the dynamics that came out from the primary world. He has a sort of experience that in the primary world things work in this way, and he was a genius in being able to tell this in his myths. So to fulfill this subcreative task in the concrete, to become oneself with the help of some invisible being who was sent to be with us, to help us to become ourselves, and to have the courage to say, I am myself, which is the motto of the meeting of this year, the courage to say, I. The freedom is the realizable but not realized possibility to become oneself, to have the courage of live a personal life, which is a small point in which the whole mystery of the universe comes together. The particular and the universal are one. And when we are ourselves and we become fully ourselves in freedom, we become capable of find delight in everything that it is. That was the task of the Maiar for the people of Middle-earth. That is the call that we as people have, each of us. But we need a bit of courage to follow this call. Thank you. And I show the book just, which is possible to get here in the library, by the way.
Thank you very much, Guglielmo. I will now call the second speaker, and our second speaker is connected from afar. It's Michaël Devaux, who is connecting from France and is joining us here. Thank you very much for being here with us, Michaël.
Thank you.
I will put you on the main front, and I will now just change one thing in the screen. Give me 1 second. Okay. So everybody can see us. Okay. So thank you very much for being here with us today, Michaël. Michaël Devaux is another Tolkien scholar who does not need a lot of presentation. Michaël was again another pioneer of the Tolkien studies in France. He has been working on Tolkien for many, many years now. It's a great pleasure to have him here with us, talking about hope and its meanings in the Athrabeth and Tolkien's theological dialogue. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Michaël. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and my translator, Michaela Young. So, hope and its meaning in the Athrabeth. Estelle is a very famous Kenya word in Tolkien's works. In The Lord of the Rings, everyone recalls that it is one among the names of Aragorn. Indeed, the Gilraen's Linod is famous. Onen I estel edin, u chebin estel anim. I gave hope to the Dundane. I have kept no hope for myself. But as we can read in The Peoples of Middle-earth, here Tolkien first called Aragorn Amin, not Estel. It is commonly accepted that Amin is a variation of Amdir. The place where Tolkien coined the distinction between Estel and Amdir is the conversation entitled in Sindarin Athrabeth Finrod a Andres, where there is hope with a capital letter and hope with a lowercase letter. But what is the difference between them? Moving from the word of hope to the concept of Estel, beyond its semantic opposition with Amdir, is no simple thing. This distinction is sometimes addressed in commentaries, although few venture to do so. But most often, the Athrabeth is used as a reference, giving access to a key of Tolkien thought. More rarely, these two concepts are discerned with a larger whole. My contribution would like to offer a third way, which is more analytical, that of explication from the conversation as such. I am not going to deal with hope in a general way in regards to Tolkien's, but to try to understand the richness of Tolkien's oral argumentation. My hypothesis is that words and definitions shift during the course of the dialogue. The sense of hope evolves during the conversation. I will concentrate on 7 exchanges on pages 320-21 in Morgoth's Ray. Finrod first asks Andres if men have hope, and she simply begins by hazarding a definition of hope. Quotation, an expectation of good which, though uncertain, have some foundation in what is known. This is the first meaning that we must take note of. Andres' stance is that men have no such hope concerning their destiny after death. There is nothing to suggest that death will be defeated. Tolkien's first conceptual position is to define hope as an expectation, and it should be noted then that the notion of hope is addressed from the point of view of its foundation. The first meaning of hope must be grounded on something known. But known how? Finrod will soon specify it by saying, negatively, that Estel is not based on experience. Since he contrasts Estel and Amdir, if Estel is not based on experience, it seems possible to conclude that this hope, Amdir, is based on experience. What is known as giving hope is known through experience. We can thus conclude from this that hope is based on a fact. This first hope is a factual hope. There are tangible reasons to hope. It is not certain, otherwise it would be more than hope, but there is a strong chance that this or that will happen. So this is a probabilistic concept of hope. This hope promises. Finrod refers to this hope as being called hope by men and Hamdir by the elves in Sindarin. Its etymology conveys the idea of a greater attention. It is hope that watches, scrutinizes the known, the visible, the world that is appears to us. This notion can probably be refined with the addition of the translation in inverted commas, looking up. That is not simply to raise one's eyes, but search for. It's quite coherent. Hope is based on the known, on experience. If I pay close enough attention to it, I have reason to hope. That said, we must ask ourselves what Finrod's objective is. Why does he give hope this name, and why does he force this etymological shift? It is to allow undress to access. Is it allow undress to access its meaning? Sorry. No. He is the one who labels its meaning. The definition she has just given. He picks up on undress definition in one word. He seeks to locate the hope which Andrev speaks of. He is looking for an initial agreement. Are they talking about the same thing? At best, he expects her to corroborate what he is talking about. However, it seems to me that Finrod is trying to move beyond this. This is not what he was waiting for. This is not the hope he expected her to talk about. In essence, he is asking her, what are you talking about? We call it I'm dear. And this is not sufficient. One might almost say that Andres is speaking to him about the small-time hope, lacking ambition. We thus witness an expansion and overshoot, a displacement that takes place thanks to Finrod. He suggests to Andres the existence of another kind of hope, a second meaning of hope, Estelle. The label Hamdir is meant to be fixed. Can Andres move beyond this small hope, when in Finrod's mind its distinction to the Estelle already exists, which he would like to lead her towards? Once again, Tolkien summarizes everything here with one word for Estelle: trust. In variations of the Hoofdmeegling chapter in the War of the Jewels, we can read a more developed definition for Estelle. Trust, hope, a temper of mind, steady, fixed in purpose, and difficult to dissuade and unlikely to fall into despair or abandon its purpose. The Estelle is indeed more profound than Hamdir because it is based on a metaphysics. The sense of being of men and elves is to be the children of Eru. The ultimate foundation of the Estelle is Eru, his love for his children. The question posed by the second meaning of hope is, therefore, already theological. Does Indreth share in this Estelle? She is a child of Eru. This is the conventional title for both elves and men alike. There should be no issue. Thus, we can perceive a seemingly clear distinction between the two hopes, one based on experience, known, mundane, factual, probabilistic. The other is based metaphysically, supernaturally, transcendentally on God's love for his children. But a new shift occurs. This is the third meaning of hope. Andress hesitates in a response to Finrod about her adherence to Estelle. She seems at first to accept the idea of being a child of Eru. Maybe, she says. Then she changes her mind and says, thinking out loud, men cannot share in this Estelle because its foundation is uncertain. Once again, the hope that Finrod expected Andres to talk about is not there. It is true that men were created by Eru and thus their Eruini, but it rejected them. The wound, the gap in human destiny consisted precisely in making the Estelle falter on its foundation. Are men not the children of the nameless, Melkor? For Finrod, this is out the question. It is not that the men did not seek healing. They went west, but they did not find any Estelle within Ardam Marit. Andres cannot therefore agree that there is Estelle for men. It is worth pointing out her uncertainty about the meaning of the words she used, her embarrassment in regards of these concepts. But is this indeed Estelle? Is it not Amdir, rather, she said, but without reason, mere flight in a dream? She perceives that there is another rope, other than Amdir. Finrod has not introduced a second meaning by chance, but what she perceives fulfills the meaning of this second hope is a variant of Amdir, another paradoxical foundation of Amdir. Somewhere between hope as founded on experience, the known, the fact, and hope as founded on the love of God, she now perceives Hamdir, hope without reason. Thus, we have a third concept, irrational hope. The Estelle that Finrod talks about is read as another Amdir. The path of hope is narrow. The first did not go far enough for Finrod, the second went too far for Andref. But this third shift towards hope forces Andres to consider another kind of hope that she had not thought of or thought about. This is a two-thing stone in the economic conversation. Nevertheless, this third meaning of hope is irrational because here it is not expressed within the rational exercise of the faith, but it is expressed in a dream. This hope is, therefore, struck by the irrationality, the incoherence of the dream. It is an escape from reality because there is, in fact, no rational way out when one is awake from darkness and death. Finrod now rushes to consider the dream-based approach to the concept of hope, introducing a new and fourth meaning of hope, desire. Quotation: in dream, many desires are revealed, and desire may be the last flicker of Estelle. Finrod is here trying to steer Estelle towards desire. The dream is an expression of desire. It's like reading Freud. In fact, the word hope in English, perhaps more than in the Romance languages, is strongly associated with expectation and desire. The concise Oxford Dictionary's definition of hope is expectation and desire combined. If hope is a dream, it has a real effect, and what this dream testifies to is a desire. Hope is then not just a dream. Let us briefly review what has been said so far. We have had looking up from undressed, understood by Finrod as Amdir, trust by Finrod for Estelle, hope without reason or dream for undress as the second meaning of Amdir, and we now have desire by Finrod for Estelle. The meaning of hope keeps shifting. We began with well-founded expectation, and we now comes to a mere glimmer of hope. The shifts in meaning diminish the stability of hope, which loses its foundation. Let us continue. Finrod disqualifies Andrest's revelation. He accuses her of confounding the words for a specific purpose. quotation, you confound dream and waking with hope and belief to make the one more doubtful and the other more sure. How does she confuse things? What is her aim? 4 terms are given, and it is tempting to read an analogy into this. But Finrod warns that it is merely confusion, a bad association. If we admit that hope is a dream, and if we admit that dream and sleep are opposed, then we cannot claim that belief is like waking. The point is that Andrés juxtaposes hope and belief. Some people, she said, journeyed west in vain hope. It is believed that healing may yet be found, but it is a mere flight in a dream from what waking they know, that there is no escape. Finrod dissolves the confusion by turning Andrés' argument on its head and forcing her to realize that when men speak of this hope and escape of and healing, they are well and truly awake. The dream is not only dreamed, it is assumed into reality. It has a real effect. Thus, Finrod tries to regain the upper hand by attacking Andrés' state of mind and revive the concept of hope as metaphysical. Andrés now shifts us definitively into theology by disqualifying, in turn, the philosophical discourse of the seekers. Asleep or awake, they say nothing clearly. She then mobilizes those of the old hope. Finrod asks who they are. The old hope does not present itself as having good reasons, but Andrés ends by saying that this hope is not grounded on any of the peoples of Arda. So we are moving away from metaphysical anthropology. Andrés says that it is grounded on the fact that Eru himself will enter Arda. We are now in theology. The question is, how will the healing of Arda come about as a result of the marrying of Melkor spread throughout creation? The answer of those who believe in old hope is that Eru will enter Arda to heal all the wounds of the world from beginning to end, which is consistent with the revelation of a Christ Redeemer, Alpha and Omega. Andrés said that this is beyond their comprehension. It is a mystery. How can the Creator enter into his creation? He is heterogeneous to it, infinitely greater than it. This risks shattering creation, Andrés fears. Finrod recognizes that this is also beyond the wisdom of the elves, and perhaps even of the Valar. He also recognizes, however, that if Eru wants to, he will find a way. And finally, Finrod comes to admit that he cannot conceive of any other way to heal Arda. In other words, faced with this hypothesis, this tradition, Finrod says that this mystery is the most rational thing. It is the only plausible hypothesis. The old hope, which was presented by Andrés as Amdir without reason, becomes, for Finrod, the rational argument to support the Estelle. This hope assumes a capital letter. So, where are the conclusions? First, this dialogue thus accumulates shiftings: probable expectation, trust, dream, desire, the old hope. the meaning of the other is never really accepted as such immediately. Otherwise, the conversation would come to an end. We are, nevertheless, not dealing with a dialogue between deaf people as they understand each other. There are several concepts of Estelle, trust or desire, and Amdir, rational and irrational. The charm of the dialogue is precisely in the fact that the meaning shifts. Second, if hope does not have a single meaning, Tolkien reveals his mastery to question not only philosophically, but also Socratically. It is not a philosophical treatise, nor a kind of Summa Theologiae. This paper hopes to have shown that in the Athrabeth, hope, mainly Estelle, is used in several different meanings, making it a real exercise in conceptualization. Third, in a real dialogue, it is Andreth who announces hope to the elves, the entrance of Eru. The earth of man, corrupted by Melkor, has nevertheless transmitted hope to the elves beyond the shadow, as the ways of God are inscrutable. Tolkien has prepared the place of redemption between the announcement of the incarnation and the hope of eternal life for the elves in Harda Healed. Tolkien flirts with faith. The Athrabeth is not the gospel, but it should be noted that in Syriac, which Tolkien's friend Father Murray was a specialist in, good news, the gospel, have the same root as hope, sabar. Hope, trust, expect are known as sabra, and good news is sebartha. In fact, the Athrabeth, in the Athrabeth, it is as if Tolkien is breaking down the different meanings of this root, but that's another story. Thank you for your invitation.
Thank you very much for this wonderful paper, Michel. We'll come back later on the Q&A. Thank you very much. That was very, very rich and very, very deep. Thank you. So I will leave now the floor to our third speaker of the session, but we'll come back because I personally have a lot of questions and comments. But I will leave now the floor to our third speaker, who is going to be Giovanni Costabile, who is connecting from Rimini. And now open his PowerPoint presentation, and then we can start straight away. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Michel, and stay with us. And I will connect everyone later on after Giovanni's talk.
I'm going to use a different approach from the one I use usually in my presentations, because I've done some research on Tolkien, which is based on source criticism. While today, on the link between our real primary world and the secondary world. But today, instead, I'm going to explore a plausible connection between two instances in Tolkien's Legendarium, which are the Ainulindalë, the Song of the Ainur, the music of the Ainur, and the Song and Dance by Lúthien, inspired by Tolkien's own wife, Edith, but a character on her own as well. And so I based this exploration essentially on one sentence by Tolkien from his letters. And Giuseppe, please send the other slide. So in letter number 131, Tolkien says, I had a mind to make a body of more or less collected legend, ranging from the legend cosmogonic to the level of romantic fairy story. And he speaks as though he had it in mind only in the past. But actually, we all understand this to be a pretty good definition of what he always had in mind to do, even with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Not only when trying to publish the Silmarillion. So his core purpose was always to do this. I think that it is pretty evident from his works. If we think of the hobbits themselves, they are a connection to our human nature in the common understanding of what being human is on an earthly point of under an earthly point of view, but also when describing fairy stories, it turns it romantic. So he also has Lúthien in mind, and I'm going to base my intervention on this connection to explore it, how it can be unraveled precisely throughout the texts we have. And I'm not going to do this by basing on the Book of Lost Tales, but I'm going to base this on the Silmarillion. And please, the next slide. When the music of the Ainur is introduced, Ilúvatar says to them that they're going to make in harmony together a great music, and because he kindled them with the flame imperishable, and so they are going to be able to adorn his theme, and in a way to do that in a way in which great beauty can awaken into song. And so it is the purpose of Ilúvatar is an aesthetic purpose at the beginning, but we're going to find out more. But essentially, here the purpose is aesthetic, and so is with Lúthien's dance. As we can see when we read in the chapter of Beren and Lúthien, that as she dances on the grass in the glades beside Esgalduin, Beren falls into an enchantment because she's the most beautiful of all the children of Ilúvatar. So against great beauty is awakened by song and dance in this case. And that's not all there is, but also I would like to point out how in pointing out Lúthien's beauty, Tolkien already from the start, this is Lúthien's first apparition in the Silmarillion, and he already points out how her dance is something which also is comparable to the cosmogonic, because he compares it to light, to waters, but also to the stars above the mid of the world. And he talks about glory and loveliness, and in their face was a shining light. Next slide, please. And this is also, of course, evident in the music of the Ainur. In this case, by contrast chords singing with words, and again we find the expression of a great music. And here, one of the things that I find most striking is that Tolkien says the music fills the void itself with its sound, and the void is not void anymore. And even though a greater music still shall be made before Ilúvatar by the course of the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar after the end of days. Next slide, please. Again, we find that as Lúthien dances in the woods, Tolkien again uses as comparison the gates of night and the dying stars, the sun behind the walls of the world. And so it is pretty clear how he still has the cosmogonic in the fairy story, in the earthy romantic fairy tale. Next slide, please. Now we get to Melkor, so the disturbance and the discord enters the music, and I think these two is paralleled in the story of Beren and Lúthien as they come to Thingol's court. Next slide, please. And so this happens because while during their first encounter nobody was aware of their meeting, when they start seeing each other more often, there is essentially Daeron, who was the minstrel, was playing the first time that Beren sees Lúthien dancing. Daeron feels envy toward Beren because Lúthien reciprocates him. And so he tells everything to Thingol, and they both are forced to appear before him. Next slide. And I think that this can be paralleled by Ilúvatar rising and proposing a new team to surpass Melkor's discord. But I will explain how better in the next slide. Because I think on some level the role of Thingol as the chief representative of a court can be paralleled to Ilúvatar. But I think also Beren's part in this sequence can parallel Ilúvatar, because he tries to act in a way that tries to compensate for what he feels to be Thingol's fault towards him, but also toward Arwen. And so he points out how even by setting a price, which is almost impossible to pay, even by doing that, he's still he's still faulty towards his daughter. Next slide. And now Lúthien, by her chanting, manages to escape Thingol's prison, which is in a treehouse in Doriath, and to reach Beren. And so this next slide, please. This is because Melkor. Back to. I want to clarify how both Beren and Lúthien react to Thingol's hard stand, which is it's an arrogant stand by Thingol, which both Beren and Lúthien reacts to. And Beren does this by pointing out Thingol's fault, while Lúthien by escaping his prison. Next slide. Then again, Melkor's discord rises, and so there is a war of sound even more violent than before, until many of the armor were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Next slide. And this is I'm not going to treat Nargothrond, because I think that what is essentially the parallels that are most striking is that Beren and Lúthien have to be accepted in some way or another, or they have to overcome a series of judgments by a series of courts before which they appear or are summoned, or where they are imprisoned. And this is what happens when Beren is imprisoned in Taornafuin. And this is what happens also in Nargothrond, but they find an ally there, which is Felagund, who then loses against Sauron, and Lúthien instead manages to do what Felagund couldn't do, which is to defeat Sauron in a magical song duel. And this is the moment when Finrod dies. He stresses how the fates of our kindred are apart. And this is what also is the obstacle between Beren and Lúthien and the success of their enterprises. This is what I wanted also to stress, that in some way there are two musics also in the story of Beren and Lúthien, as we have two magical duels, one between Finrod and Sauron, and the other one between Lúthien and Sauron. And so we have the same thing which we have in the Ainulindalë, when the third team of Ilúvatar grows amid the confusion. It was unlike the others, for it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds in delicate melodies, but it could not be quenched, and it fell, and it took to itself power and profundity. Next slide. This is where Lúthien performs a song which can be compared to Ilúvatar's, because no walls of stone could hinder it. And it is described in the same words which Tolkien uses to describe the final song which the Ainur and the Curse of the Children of Ilúvatar are going to sing after the end of days. It is a song of greater power, the same words. The next slide. And this is again the same concept. There are two music progressing at one time before the seat of Ilúvatar, and they were actually at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, while the other was loud and vain. And it seems that most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its own solemn pattern. This is the music of the new team by Ilúvatar. And next slide. I think that this can be also compared to what Lúthien manages to do in Morgoth's own court, because she casts a veil before his eyes, and even he falls asleep. And this is something which also reminds us of the idea of the void itself being filled, and it wasn't void no more. And to conclude, there are a couple more slides. Beren says when they leave Angband, they meet Carcarth again, the evil wolf of Morgoth, which had been enchanted into sleep by Lúthien as they arrived, but now has woken up again. And to confront him, Beren puts out the Silmaril before him, and here is a fire that shall consume you and all evil things. And this is challenge which Beren is going to pay by the loss of his own hand. And I think that this is a core moment, because by doing this, Beren is going to pay with his own life. And so this is going to cause, next slide, this is going to cause by his death eventually in Doriath when they come back, and he's going to call for Lúthien's final proof which she's going to give to Mandos, and that I would like to compare to Ilúvatar's final rising, when even he is no longer imperturbable, and in one chord deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, sing as the light of the eye of Ilúvatar, the music ceased. And I think that this is what happens also after Lúthien's final song. Next slide, please. Because this is Lúthien's song before Mandos is the most fair that ever in words was woven, and the song most sorrowful that ever the world shall hear, unchanged, imperishable. It wove together the two themes of words, one of the sorrow of the elder and the grief of man, of the two kings met by Ilúvatar to dwell in the kingdom of earth and the innumerable stars. And I think another key word here is imperishable, because it is the same word by which Tolkien defines the flame imperishable, which, as also Padre Spirito just reminded us, was an image of the Holy Spirit. But I said that I was not going to make real-world suggestions, so I think this is okay for now, and I hope you appreciated my exploration, which is quite new to me as well. It came to me as a new idea, but it was inspiring, and I hope it inspired you too, and that you appreciated it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. There was another great paper. I really liked this kind of connection, not just between the primary and the secondary world, but between different moments of the secondary world. And I think this is very, very informative. I mean, we tend to compare the primary with the secondary, but in fact, the dynamics, the same dynamics apply to the connection between the different parts of the secondary world. We shouldn't really create too much an opposition between primary and secondary. At the end of the day, they are only the same chain. And I think also Michaël's paper was going to this direction. And I really loved, let me say that, Michaël's paper, especially in stressing how, if you want, the literary heuristic on which Tolkien is engaging, something which is never ending. I mean, it never gets to a proper definition. It's by doing art, if you want, you're getting closer and closer to the semantics, the proper semantics of the world. The language is, if you want, an exercise in approximation, and the more you are creative, the more you get closer, if you want, to the meaning. So now we can open the floor. So you can see we have different windows, and I will ask, both the people are following us on the various social. They can write on YouTube, or they can write on Facebook, and they will ask the question to our speakers, or I can invite the people in the room to ask questions. And to do that, I will ask you to stand up and to go with that microphone over there, which is the one turning to the stage. So the floor is open. Please go open with the questions, otherwise I will start. So I will start with a question, if you don't mind me, yes, and I will ask a question to Michaël first. And I would like to ask him a bit to, if you want, to develop this idea of prophecy, because the prophetic potential, if you want, on the secondary world, that you touched on, and it's certainly something which, if you want, Tolkien is keen. There are a few letters that are unpublished, and especially there's one letter which I had the fortune to look at, which was a response to a German scholar who wrote his lemma, the lemma about Tolkien, and this is unpublished. It's not found in Carpenter's collection. It's a part which is not found in Carpenter's collection. That letter, Tolkien explicitly said that everything which, if you want, recalls the evangelical element is not conscious, it's not voluntary, but it's prophetic. So I would like to ask you whether I can develop a bit this sense of prophecy, and especially whether you wanted to clarify why the sense is this kind of explicitness on the prophetic value is only found in unpublished texts, okay? Because the question is, if the prophecy remains untold, I mean, if prophecy, the etymology of prophecy is prophecy, to say openly, to say in front of, to say publicly, how can we have a prophecy which is not explicit? I mean, we have it, the old hope in the Athrabeth, but that's if you want a bit of an exceptional thing. I mean, most of the other texts, there is prophetic potential, but it's never explicit. So I would like to ask Michel whether he could tell us what we think about this, and especially whether it's really possible to have, if you want, an unsaid prophecy, okay? And then what's the point then of an unsaid prophecy, if the question is clear?
Is it possible to answer in French?
Yeah.
Yes. Je vais parler doucement. Sur la question de la dimension explicite, en fait, de la prophétie chez Tolkien en général, et dans l'Athrabeth en particulier, je crois que je n'ai plus la référence de la lettre en tête, mais il y a une lettre où il dit qu'il n'écrira jamais sur l'incarnation du Christ. Voilà. Et quand on lit l'Athrabeth, on se dit, bah si, il l'a fait. Et je crois que toute l'ambivalence, l'hésitation, l'extrême limite à laquelle va Tolkien, c'est qu'il aménage la place de l'incarnation du Christ, mais justement, il ne dit pas la deuxième personne de la Trinité va s'incarner. Il dit « Eru va entrer en Arda ». Bon. Dans l'Athrabeth lui-même. Après, dans le commentaire de l'Athrabeth, et dans les notes sur le commentaire de l'Athrabeth même, alors, Tolkien ajoute « Eru va entrer en Arda sous forme humaine ». Mais ça n'est pas dit dans l'Athrabeth. Voilà. Donc, Tolkien s'approche au plus près de l'idée de l'incarnation du Christ, et donc d'une prophétie de l'incarnation, si on veut. Il est enfin, pour qui sait lire, c'est immédiatement reconnaissable. Et d'ailleurs, C.S. Kilby, qui a lu l'Athrabeth en 1966, l'a reconnu, l'a dit, l'a écrit, l'a publié dans Tolkien et le Silmarillion en 1977. Bon. Donc, on a cette espèce de limite à ne pas franchir que Tolkien annonce d'un côté, et on a dans l'Athrabeth le fait qu'il s'approche au plus près pour le dire, mais il ne va pas plus loin d'une certaine façon. Bon. Et ce qui est génial, je trouve, dans la dernière note sur le commentaire de l'Athrabeth, qui aurait dû sans doute être, si Tolkien était allé au bout de son travail, qui aurait dû être la dernière page, en fait, du Silmarillion, avec les appendices, etc. Bon. Eh bien, il parle cette fois de la réentrée d'Eru en Arda. C'est-à-dire que dans l'Athrabeth, il parle de l'entrée d'Eru en Arda, et dans la note, il parle de la réentrée d'Eru en Arda. C'est évidemment l'Apocalypse. C'est la seconde venue du Christ, mais ce qui est extraordinaire, c'est que d'une part, il aménage la place pour l'incarnation du Christ, mais il n'en parle pas. Et d'autre part, il parle de l'Apocalypse, donc on est juste avant et bien après, si je puis dire, mais on reste toujours dans l'implicite, pour répondre à votre question, enfin j'espère répondre à votre question, on reste toujours dans l'implicite, cet interdit que Tolkien s'était posé, il ne l'a pas franchi, il ne l'a pas transgressé, mais il s'avançait au plus près d'un côté et de l'autre. Et ce dont il ne parle pas, c'est de la vie du Christ, justement. Donc on aménage une place pour l'Évangile, on est compatible avec un esprit qui croit en la Sainte Trinité, comme il le dit dans la lettre 131, mais il ne va pas plus loin. Est-ce que c'est une réponse qui peut vous convenir ?
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Very clear. Any other questions? To ask the question again, please go. If you're not me, please go to the floor. I will continue then. If no one asks question, I will ask now a question to Giovanni, if you don't mind. But please stop me, otherwise I keep asking questions. Okay, so please do intervene. What I would like to ask Giovanni is to go a bit deeper on this comparison that he was developing. Okay, so I think that this comparison between the Ainulindalë and the Berenute is very, very convincing. Okay, I am completely convinced. So the question I would like to ask him, without again going to the primary, which I quite like, is why is that? Okay, what is, if you want, the theoretical or even theological foundation, the secondary theological foundation of this comparison? Why do things keep repeating? Why there is this sort of a pattern? Is it because Ilúvatar keeps intervening, so we should always see Ilúvatar's intervention behind things like Lúthien and Beren? It is because there is some sort of secret life of creation? What sort of theological or philosophical inference would you make on the basis of the comparison you just made?
It's only answerable by speculating, but I think that Tolkien might have liked us to speculate on this subject because of the comment he left on in letter 151, which is so earlier. And so probably my guess is that he might have in mind the fact that the two of the three interventions by Ilúvatar were the coming of man and the coming of elves and the coming of man, and so probably the coming together of elves and man in Beren and Lúthien is the most plausible place in the story to have the music, how can I say, embodied in them in a sense.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think perhaps it's not very clear even to Tolkien himself. Why is that? I think
it might be that he did not consciously realize he was repeating himself in this way. It's also plausible, yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Lucas has a question, so I will ask him to go there.
That wasn't a question yet. I would say that it's more of a sort of a comment. Okay, it's probably more of a comment or some kind of extension to what Father Guglielmo said, that the creation process in the Ainulindalë is not finished. Yes, it's a continuous process, which obviously is connected with St. Thomas Aquinas' set of the continuous creation, is creatio continua. And it is very often said that the Ainulindalë is Tolkien's book of Genesis. But then it also sort of reminds me of what we get in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, which we tend to think of being a vision of the future, but it isn't. It isn't just the future. Of course, the future is revealed there too, but it isn't just the future. So would you say that Tolkien's story in the Ainulindalë is also that kind of a book of Revelation, or is it just the Genesis in the kind of the sense that we normally think of it as the story of the creation and that's it?
No, I believe, Lucas, that you are right, because if the fulfillment of the music will come at the end of days, is the apocalypse, the revelation of a dynamic, of a loving providence who has as center the free love of Ilúvatar for his children, elves and men. No? Everything is shaped in view of this, for the Valar, unexpected newcomers. So if everything is in view of the happiness of men, it's an apocalypse. No? It's a revelation of a plan of benevolence which is still unfolding and which contains within all the dynamics of drama and love, which are repeating all the time, because in fact the disruption of Melkor could explain somehow of a root of a bad seed, but the bad seed is still growing if there is someone who tends it, no? As Tolkien says in some other parts. So it's everything is an ongoing process, and for that freedom is involved and personal answer is involved. And in fact, I am totally convinced that Genesis and Apocalypse, being two different genders in literature, in theology, are overlapping, because they express how things are, not only how things were. And we have no idea whatsoever what things should be or would be. We can more or less have a grasp of how things are going, and we are in a mess. And at the same time, we see that we have a possibility of growing freer and happier, but continuously in a kind of returning theme of drama in real life. So yes, it's an apocalypse, not in the sense of catastrophic future, but as an unveiling of how the mystery of life is. But the result, when we read, even with the sadness of the history, deeper than the sadness remains this sense of hope, no? This Estel. There is something that is deeper than sadness. There is an harmony which englobes the disharmony. There is something which is stronger and deeper and sweeter, which gives delight. And perhaps that is one of the most effective creative capacity for Tolkien, of making you taste that there is something splendid hidden beyond all the ruin that hunts. We have a lot of werewolves and Saurons around us and within us. No? So it's magnificent, and it's all together. No other author that I know is so capable of blending styles and permitting you to have this sort of intuition of something that cannot be defined, no? Even with all this shifting of significance that Michaël was telling about hope. Because reality is like that. We cannot grasp in a crystallized way anything. Everything is larger than that. But there is a solidity in a sense of hope that remains despite all this.
Thank you very much, Guglielmo. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can finish here just in time, 5:30. So thank you very much. I think that was a very great start of our conference. We are gonna have 40 minutes breaks until 6:10 p.m. CTE time, 5:10 p.m. British Standard Time. So we see 40 minutes. We are going to use another YouTube link. So if you go back, if you want to follow us later on, you go back to our Facebook page or our YouTube page, and we're going to start in 40 minutes. Thank you very much to all our three speakers, and thank you very much for all the audience here and all connected online. Thanks a lot, and see you later.
Thank you.